firstly, thanks for joining me. This is fun. I always love hanging out with you. You've got so much wisdom and experience, so this is cool. I want to start off by asking a really off-the-cuff question, and that is, what is your favorite childhood memory?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. It's interesting. I have these real fond memories of a place our family would go during the summer every year. And it's in the Adirondacks, which is where I still go to, and I've shared that with you. And it was one of those things where it was 2 weeks a year. All of our cousins were in the same place, and you literally couldn't wait for the 30-minute drive because we weren't that far away. Everyone else was further away. And you just couldn't wait to get there, and you knew every mile, like as you were driving in. And then there was a long driveway, and you knew every tree, and you turn the corner, and there's the lake. And the first thing you do is go run and jump in the lake, but you're really around all this family and cousins that you only see a few times a year. But it was kind of like that was and is, to this day. And I remember specific years, and what's interesting about those is those are memories that stack on top of memories. So it's like at this age, at that age, at this age. So you're kind of like, they're grooving in these memories of just kind of being in the same place over and over again, where you just feel comfortable and at home. And those are definitely some of my fondest, childhood memories for sure.
Well, and you keep going back there, right?
So it reinforces.
It reinforces now I'm doing it to my kids.
I was going to say, this is where you go.
How your kids dealing?
That's right.
That's their favorite place.
Now my wife says we've brainwashed them into this is their favorite place. So maybe my parents did that to me too without me knowing it. But that is kind of those fondest memories, and for sure, yeah.
And of course, as a skier myself, I struggle to find really good mountains outside of the Rockies, but there is good skiing upstate New York and further up, right?
Yeah, there is. It's aggressive because it's often the conditions aren't as nice as they are out west, but they're steep and it's fast. Yeah. And, some call it ice, we call it hard packed, and it's fast. So you can learn to ski, and there's some really great skiing, and it's cold. So the snow's there, and it's always good. But you may not get consistent, fluffy snow, but there's winter there. So we grew up a lot skiing and then doing the lake stuff in the summer. So all that is activities. It's what's interesting, though, you realize you go a little further south, and it's not that predictable. But up there, it's very predictable.
Right.
Yeah.
And not too many people may know that you're a decathlete.
Yeah.
Talk to me about when you figured out that you're not good at one or two things, but you're good at 10 things. Like, how did you come to that realization?
Yeah, so my story's an accident. Now, I was actually playing basketball. I was from upstate New York, where the spring is very short, so track's a short season. So you do track just to stay in shape for your other sports. I did high jump, but I was really playing basketball. In college, I was playing basketball, and I did track the same thing, but I was good at the high jump. And then I started getting bored at going to the events and only doing one thing, so I did a few more things. And then the Dan and Dave commercials came out, and I was a junior in college. I was like, I could do this. And I said, I'll try that next year. And the next year I did it, and I made the NCAA's Division III, small school. But that's when I realized that maybe I was doing the wrong sport for a while. And it's a weird combination of things that make you a good decathlete. It's someone who's super fast, it just jumps off, you can't not see it. Whereas we're just fast, we're not super fast, we're strong, we're not super strong. And then there's a certain amount of coordination. And my other sports really made it so I could learn new things fast. So part of it is there's a lot of guys that can run, but they can't do the technical stuff. And because of my basketball background and played soccer, I could pick up the technical events pretty quickly. And that was the differentiator. So once you start picking up those, all of a sudden you're like, wait, you can do all 10 of these, where being good at 4 or 5 doesn't do it. You got to be able to do across the board.
And what would you consider being one of your biggest challenges that you had to overcome?
Well, one of the biggest challenges was putting it all together, and I actually never did that the way I wanted to, and it was because I was doing good at all the events, but then I had different injuries, and so like the putting it all together was one big piece of the puzzle that never I had all the pieces, but then I'd get hurt. And so that was a big part of that challenge. And then once that happens a few times, then the doubt creeps in. So then you're in great shape, but you're not really mentally as sharp as you were when you didn't know as much. So it was so that was part of the journey that I was on, and that's actually a lot of where my whole program came from. Is I was missing some very key pieces that really drive that optimal performance that is beyond ability and strength and technical things. And that's kind of the essence of what now our organization does, is what are those keys to optimal performance. Those were some of the things I was missing too, but there was no one out there that could give me that advice as well.
Well, and I love that you said that, because, people don't always think of super athletes that have, these mental challenges. We go through mountains and valleys, all of us as humans, and even especially when you're performing at that level of elite athletic capability. But was there a particular aha for you that made you go, oh, if I can shift this, then not only am I just getting slightly better, I have created a multiplying effect?
A few of them, and it really came in stages over time. But there was a breakthrough moment, and it was actually, unfortunately, at the end of my career, because I was in great shape, but mentally I was there, and then I had an injury. So it was like these three different things going on. And part of it is when you get really, really in shape. I had some issues with some old injuries from other sports that then I'd pull my hamstring because I was in great shape. So it was this weird phenomenon of you're going faster, so then you get hurt. But what was interesting is I really started to see the trend line of when I'm on, I was really on, but then when I'm not on, I was not on. And meaning and that's when we use an achieve, that's when I was in the right column. When I'm in the zone, man, I could do a lot of great things. But then it's like you wake up and you're not. And what I started to do is start to go after that. Say, wait, what's determining how I show up and what puts me in that right column or left column, being on, not being on. And that aha is kind of then that sent me down that road of what are those key little things. And there are these little things that you go, wait, this little change, all of a sudden I'm on more often and I have more of a predictable way of showing up. I'm more resilient. So that happened, towards the end of my career, because I realized it wasn't just ability. Yeah. There's something else going on, and that was that kind of big aha, and then that created that journey of saying, wait, what are those little things that make that big difference?
Well, let's talk a bit about that left column, right column, because that's not an easy concept. To grasp until you really understand what that really means. Because for most people, it may just be, well, I have a good day or a bad day. But it doesn't mean that, right? It's a little deeper. Why don't you explain kind of what that is, and then how maybe the second part of that would be is then how do you move from left to right? Right?
So what we do in Achieve is in our system is simple as like when you're having a bad day, good day. When you're really not feeling on, we get underneath, well, how do you feel on those days? And what you're going to see is, I've done this now thousands of times with thousands of people. It's the same, right? I'm frustrated, I'm stuck, right. I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm drained. And that's what we call kind of left column, which doesn't mean I have a bad attitude. I'm just not on that day. You can have very positive people that are having a bad day. And we got to get out of the idea that it's positive thinking, because it's way bigger than that. It's way deeper than that. I can be the most positive person having a bad day. And that's just me in the left column that day. And what it gets underneath is when we're in there, we just don't work as well. It's just, we don't think as well. In my old sports world, you don't run as fast. You're not as coordinated. Like, you're just out of sync. And if you're in a business, if you got, by the way, your whole organization, you have 5,000 people in the left column. So you're lowering productivity out of those people just based on if they're in that left column. The right column is the opposite, right? That's why it's left-right, is it's yin-yang. It's a polar opposite. Now I'm energized, I'm motivated, I'm connected, I'm in sync, I feel like I'm moving forward, I'm proud, I'm confident. That's the right column days. And we've all had both of them, and it's just part of being human. But teams do that too.
Yeah.
And what we have to get underneath, though, is it's not an accident. Like, there are real fundamental things that we can do that get us set up to be in the right column more often than the left column, but it isn't going to happen magically.
Right.
There's things you have to do. There's habits you have to create, things like that, to actually get you more in that right column. And where I was before is people say, oh, go be positive. And it's like, I'm trying as hard as I can to be positive. It's not that simple.
Yeah, and I'm a runner myself, and there's days where you just want to get up and go crush 10, 20 miles, right? And then there's days where you're like, I don't even want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And it's an energy level if there's no way to kind of clearly delineate between left and right, the typical way we look at it is like, I'm just not feeling it, right? And the guys that have gone through that will typically say to you, that's okay, then just run at that level of energy. Mm-hmm. Where the good days, you have good ones. But it's more than that, right? So you said
that's good guidance, though.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, what they're doing, and that's actually advanced guidance. Okay, a lot of people, they're saying, oh, I'm having a bad day. So they're comparing it to their great day, so they feel even worse. Mm. So even that little subtle thing you just stated is a way to keep you from getting extra frustrated. Mm. And actually what happens is when you're on physically, it's because your body's going through a cycle of, right. You trained real hard one day, you're going to be sore the next day, right? So that's your physical, and then what happens is, oh, I'm not on, then I'm having a emotional left column day. Versus, no, I should be sore and I should be a little less today but what a lot of people do is they want every day to be on like it's perfect. And we're not, we're dynamic. And right. Teams are dynamic. People are dynamic. And giving yourself permission to say, wait, what's my best today? Mm. When I'm not as on versus when I'm really on, there are two different measurements holding yourself accountable. And what a lot of people do is they only have one measurement. And then that's part of what they feel disappointed. Oh, I had a bad day. Well, actually, maybe you didn't have a bad day. I remember in my training days, one of my coaches say, Mark, get all the way through the warm-up before you decide how you feel. Because you could show up at the track just feeling sluggish and off and awful and, for whatever reason. And did a lot. And you get through the warm-up and you're like, I actually feel pretty good today. Right. But if I went on, how I felt before I started, I'm like, oh, today's going to be a bad day. I'm not going to be able to do anything today. Fast forward 20, 30 minutes, 45 minutes later, you're like, ooh, I'm on today. This is good. I'm sharper than I thought I'd be. And it's just kind of giving yourself that permission to get going. But you're still not going to be the best version of yourself ever, every day. And right. And that's one of the principles that we espouse is like, wait, you got to be the best you are where you are now, not ideally or when you're perfect.
And when we're doing physical things, that makks a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
You right. tend to really feel that energy levels when you have to go do something, whether you being just an amateur or a pro athlete, right? But I also know that you have translated this into business and into teams. Yes. So we show up at work that way. Yes. We have energy levels or however you want to put left column, right column thinking in business. Can you cite maybe a very specific example of a team or a member that you've worked with that went through something like that and then was like being able to move from left to right column, and then how did it actually translated into increased performance?
Yeah, I'll use an example from Monday. I was talking with someone that's new to the program, and I'll give you a few, but literally this is Monday. They were exposed to the tools in November, December. And one of those is like really setting, wait, what can I do today? What's success look like? And this person, they're coming back from the new year, and they're always like they always have a to-do list that's longer than what can be done. So, and they're obviously a high performer. They get a lot of done, but they're always stressed out. And so it's at their expense. And what people don't get is that wears you out over time, which over time lowers your performance. And you worn out is not as good as you when you're on. You can still get 50, 60 things done. You're going to get more done at a higher level if you're feeling on versus worn out. And what this person literally told me this week was, what would have happened? It's the first week of the new year. I've got all these things because I finally took a little bit of time off. My old way of doing things is I am stressed out before I wake up. This is going to be, I'm already behind. And like, I'm going to be stressed for the next 2 weeks because of X, Y, Z. They made a mental shift and said, wait a minute, what can I do today? What's, it's the first day, what can I do to go be, and they felt that tension just drop instantly. They got a lot done. They were productive. They weren't anxious, but then they're coming in the next day and they're like, okay, let's build on that. And they just in that moment, so you can make these big shifts and subtle things very quickly. And because it's just throttling down a little bit sometimes where you're not winding yourself up, which is lowering your productivity.
Okay.
And that's something people have to figure out is you can't do better than you can do. When you try to do more than you can do, you do less, not more. And that's that self-management.
That is such a key concept, right? When you try to do more, you actually end up doing less,
yes.
right? Yes. Translate that for me into maybe a specific example around teams. So we talked, individuals. We talked about, athletes or, physical team, how we show up as an individual. But as teams too, right?
Yes.
We have these different levels, right? So, just share a good example in that space.
So I'll give you a real world sales team example, and this team was hard pressed to grow, flat market. We need to grow by 10%. And they're just grinding it out, pushing them harder and harder. And they just couldn't move the needle. And then the leader did some work with us and we kind of looked at this concept of, are you maximizing? So we looked at it through the lens, we were just talking about myself,
right.
But are you maximizing your team? So take everything we're talking about scales. So if I have 100 people on my team, okay, and then the example in the individual side, I'm only feeling good when I'm on, those are my best days. When I take that to my team, I'm really feeling good about 10% of my team, 20% of my team, because they're the ones that are giving me my best results. Now, 80% I'm frustrated with because they're not like them, right? Well, what we did with that team member, with that leader is wait a minute, your job is to get the most out of your whole team, not get the most out of your top people. And that was a mental shift for them because he was always left column when he worked with his bottom performers. And what we got him to get is, wait, what if you got 20% more out of your bottom performers? They're never going to be your top performers. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden they're climbing and that adds to your aggregate. That adds to your overall performance. And that was like this wake-up call of, wait a minute, how am I showing up with them? And then they realized, wait, their best is different than the people, the top's best. But if I get the best from everyone, then I'm tapping into a whole bunch of different capacity that I wasn't getting before. He created a strategy of what do I do with the middle third? What do I do with the bottom third? How do I get the most out of each one? And now he was right column with the bottom third, right column with the middle third, right column with the top third.
So instead of thinking of right column with the top 10% and left column with everybody else, you basically find a strategy that says, how do I become right column for each of them?
I'm holding them accountable to them being their best. Just like I'm accountable to being my best on my bad days, but it's a bad day, best day, right? It's not like I take the day off. It's like, well, hey, what's my best when I'm not on? Yeah. So you're actually elevating the accountability. In 2 quarters, they were up 33% year over year in growth. So it just tapped into this capacity that was there. And it was just by saying, wait, what if I got the best out of everyone versus just the best out of my top people?
So I love this because it's so practical, right? And we'll talk a bit about some of the tactics one can use to actually get you there. But One of the things that we often find with organizations is they get caught up in this thing called the implementation trap. So as you know, we work with a lot of organizations that are massive supply chain, operational oriented, manufacturer distributors, and they typically have a common theme that they run SAP as their ERP. And they will spend millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars implementing this massive piece of technology. And they get cornered into this notion that all I have to do is go live on time and in budget. I just need to make sure that thing works. And what happens is they leave the entire business behind. And the best analogy I can always come up with, it's like you theoretically teach the team how to run or ride a car, like you teach a 16-year-old how to drive a car, and then you go, okay, here's the keys, and you walk away.
Yeah.
And then of course everybody ends up doing what they think they need to do, and they do it the best. Everybody's got good intention, they're trying to make it work.
Yes.
And this multi-million-dollar investment becomes basically a simple calculator.
Yeah.
What's the psychology behind organizations being caught up in that thing called the implementation trap and don't see that it's a different mindset that it takes to get and invest in something so big?
Yeah, I'll answer it in a couple phases. I'm going to take the first one first, which is implementation phase, like the goal line. So we talk about sometimes is like, where's that finish line?
Yeah.
Where are you taking things to? And we use that in a few different examples. And a lot of times we think we're at the finish line and we've only done 80% of the race.
Yeah, a little bit like the false summit, right?
Yeah.
You think you've achieved,
yes,
but you haven't. There's still a whole nother mountain cap.
That's right. So if you say, like, we got to launch this and think that's the finish, that's not the finish. In our world, that's a base camp, right? Yeah. The end is it's being used effectively.
Yeah.
And what we do is we got there, so that means we're there. When the real there is it working? Are we using it right? Which obviously takes more time and iteration, and it takes some training and practice, and then it becomes the way you work. So moving those goalposts further along, moving that finish line to say it's not we've implemented, it's we've implemented and then you realize, wait a minute, that's us getting the most out of this investment, and tie it back to the investment. If you've put all this time and energy into something, the goal isn't just to check the box, it's to get the value out of it. Mm-hmm. And if just moving that further along is the outcome that you're looking for, is we're utilizing and implementing effectively, and we're seeing the benefits, right? It's that redefinition of what is success.
I love that, because I think it's a leadership failure,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's all about, okay, I'm going to spend this money, all this energy, all these resources. It's years worth of work, and then there's a goal line. But what you're saying is that goal line is only one step of the entire journey.
Yes.
And the measure of success is that our business is improving business objectives, we're growing, we're scaling, we're managing our working capital, all these other things. And this is just a step along that journey. But there's that sense. And I think part of the challenge is that when people get to that goalpost, the implementation, and don't see the end goal, right?
Yeah.
They go like, okay, we've done it.
Yes.
And now we can go back to the way it used to be.
Yes.
It's almost like it was this thing that we had to do, not seeing it as a completely new way of doing business.
Well, and this is actually one of the things that we see that is a gap in performance that goes left column, right column, is like the goal is the end game, where really the goal is an outcome. But right. the outcome you're looking for is a new performance level. So we don't go to just goals, because once you hit a goal, you set a new goal, right? And that's the challenge. And often we're operating just going to kind of these moments in time, versus what you want to be moving towards is actually a new phase. And a new phase is now we're effectively using this tool, not we launched the tool. Right. So you move, and that's not an ending. See, oftentimes problems with leadership is they're setting goals that are an endpoint. And the truth is, the world keeps spinning.
Why do we think leaders do that? Like, what's the psychology or the thinking, or maybe even the historical way of doing business that brings this baggage and thought process to the table?
That part of it is that this is what we've been doing. Here's your objectives, go deliver on it, and then you go get another set of objectives.
Right. And everybody's been taught, like, just put a number there, put a metric, hit the metric, right? And then...
Yep. And that mean you may deliver on the objective, but not deliver the results you're looking for. And there's oftentimes a gap between activity and true productivity. And like, oh, we did it, doesn't mean it was done right and done well. And that's something that we work to get leaders to shift is it's bigger than one outcome, because the thing about the reality is you got to keep doing it. And in a case like this, it's like you've implemented this tool. It's not, the goal isn't to say, okay, we touch it or goodbye. It's we're using it right. And that is not an endpoint. That is that we talk about, you go to a new normal instead of to an endpoint. You have these goals that are guiding you along the journey, and then you set new goals.
And that requires change management, right? And I'm not a big fan of the word change management because it means I'm managing change. I'm not actually activating change, and it requires us, right? Especially if you start thinking about outcomes from a performance point of view versus the goal of implementing. Talk to me a bit about where some of these change management concepts fall flat. The traditional ones where it's about I'm communicating with everybody, I'm putting a newsletter out, everybody gets an email. There's this constant communication, but we think that actually causes change.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we have to get is, like you said, we understand that our tool helps with change. And so you could call it a good change management tool, but that's not the way we look at it. We look at it as high-performing habits really are good with change. And so if you have strong performance habits and practices, you will naturally be good in evolving, and you'll be part of the change. You'll be driving the change. But oftentimes people aren't, so it's painful. But it's not painful because of the change. It's because the habits are pulling against what's best. And the leaders can be reinforcing that. And that's something we see a lot is you're really just kind of saying, hey, this is bad. We're going to help you get through something bad versus how do we make this a positive? How make this energizing? And also we do get that but you need to use certain tools and practices that make it easier instead of if you just kind of say, hey, we're doing this, we used to do that. That's going to be hard for people if you don't have some good practices in there that help you kind of go, oh, here's how we're going to move to that next thing.
Well, and that's, I would say, is probably one of the biggest reasons for those implementation failures.
Yeah.
Short of the leadership guidance, as you mentioned earlier, and some of the other things. But when we try to just tell people, hey, it's going to be different, but we don't actually put in those habits or those disciplines.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we tend to find with ourselves when we get roped into working with companies, it's usually post-implementation. Couple of years into it, they're now starting to feel the pain, or they're starting to go back to old ways because they never changed, right?
Yeah.
So one of the first things we try to put in place is daily disciplines, new habits, all of these things. Talk to me about how do those habits actually drive us towards right column thinking, and how can leaders, in particular executives, help guide that process?
Yeah, one of the things I tell people all the time is we talk about change like it's negative and like it's a negative thing. When change is just constant, it's part of reality. It's not positive, negative. There's positive changes, there's negative changes. But actually what makes people uncomfortable, one of the things that we get people to understand is people have expectations every day. They show up to work with certain expectations. We call that kind of your past. That's your, like, what are you looking forward to? Most people's expectations are anchored in their past. This is what I've done. And when you make a change, it's not the change, it's you've made their past irrelevant. And if that's their expectations, they all of a sudden don't have a future. And when people don't have a future, they go hard left. And what leaders need to do is say, yes, we've made this change, but they have to show people, but here's where we're going and it's better than where we were.
Is it creating hope or a safety net?
Both. It's really just giving people the groundedness that, hey, we have a future and here's how you're in it. And here's what that looks like. And then all of a sudden people get back to the right column, which makes them rational. When you're in the left column, you're very irrational. You hold on to things that don't work. And that's that defensiveness and things. And it's not because that's just people's human nature of holding on to what they know. Leaders have to use some certain techniques and methods to replace that. So they go, wait, why am I holding on to this when I can grab onto something else that's better and stronger? And that's something that leaders often are missing is what is that? What's that thing that you say, wait, here's where it's going to be, not the plan or the target, because that doesn't give people comfort because they've seen things not work and not happen. It's really giving that vision of, okay, here's this new reality. And then that puts people in that right back, being grounded. And then they want to be part of it because then that's their future. When you miss that piece, that's where people in organizations struggle because people will hold on to what they know, even if it's wrong. Because there's a strong emotional connection to the way things have been done and the way they do things.
Do you have a particular story that comes to mind of an executive leader that had to do exactly that with a team? Post implementation, they put something in, and now people are kind of saying we're done, and having to change that paradigm on change is actually there's hope related to this. It's not you don't have to dismiss what you used to do. Obviously, which is part of what the change is, right? If I lose sight of all of these 20 years of experience and I have to do something different, therefore I have no value anymore. Do you have a story of something that comes to mind?
I have one that comes to mind. It's around actually where basically the leadership redefined what success was for the role. And if I've been in the role for something for 20 years, and this is what I do, this was a CFO, large organization. And it was like in the old days, it was like, give me the numbers, give me them on time, use the systems, use our tools. They have to be accurate and on time. And you push it across the table and you say, we're good. Well, what happened is that's not good enough anymore. Now we have to define it. We have to tell what this means. We have to give advice to the business. We know what this means. They don't. Well, for a huge chunk of time, people weren't comfortable doing that because that's not what they did. And they were wondering, why aren't they doing it? You know, they know the insights. They know what these numbers mean, and the people they're handing them to can't decipher all this data, all this information. And what was happening is those leaders, to get a little more advanced, they had to shift how they saw themselves in their role. They had to redefine what does success look like for my job. And without that, they were saying, go do this. But in their mind, wait, that's not my job. My job is this, this, and this. And what we help get that leader to get is you can't just tell them to go do it. You have to actually show them that they have to recreate, here's what my job looks like. You have to paint that new picture. And then all of a sudden, that becomes their job, not this thing I got to learn that's hard and uncomfortable. And not only that, they were the best people to give that advice because they were the ones that knew the data. They were the ones that knew the numbers. But if they just said, you're not doing this, you got to do this, right? But they're not because that's not my role. That's not what I do. They had to take a minute to redefine. And this is about 450 people across a finance org. And it took just months, not years. And before you know it, they're all doing it. And not only that, they were good at it and they were excited about it and energized about it. And the people that were quiet, they were like, wait, I get to have a voice at the table. It's expected. But at first it's like, I'm not talking. That's not my job. So you have to redefine. And we use that something called, what's your functional identity? Meaning, what is it you do every day and what does that look like? And if it changes what you do. If I tell you got to do this, but my old identity is around, I do this, I'm not going to do it. Because we're habits. We're creatures of habit. We just got to get those habits working for us instead of against us.
So a good leader would be able to help define a new functional identity for his team so that they can see the change that's required.
And the behaviors.
And the behaviors,
Yeah.
right? And the disciplines that
To
come
model
with
it.
it.
Here's what your job looks like today.
This is why.
Here's what you used to do.
Don't be afraid. This is what it's going to look like. What do you say to leaders who cannot even see that for themselves? So they get, what are those self-limiting beliefs or fears
Yep.
that kick in for leaders that they can't even identify their new functional identity?
So, Martin, one of the things we tell people is model first, is have you done it for yourself first?
Right.
So like one of the things we say, don't tell them to change. You got to go do it for yourself first, because you have to model the behaviors you want. So you have to make sure you're there first. So part of leadership is leading, which is being the first one there. And don't tell them doing something that you're not doing. Like you've got to walk the walk first. And then we use a method, model it, then build it. And when you build it, you don't punish them for not doing it, because they actually don't know what it looks like. And we talk about, now you got to go build it. And what build looks like is they did it the old way, because that's the way they've been doing it. Instead of being punitive right away and say, okay, here's what we did, right? But when we're thinking about it the new way, what do you think that might look like? What does that look like? And they're like, well, I'm not, let's think about it. And then you build it with them, like, I guess I could have done this. I guess I could have done that. And then before you know it, they go, oh, now I see I could have done it a different way. They're on autopilot. People are on autopilot, right? The question is that autopilot in the right lane? Is it doing the right things? If it is, keep staying on autopilot. But if it isn't, you've got to upgrade that, and you have to make those adjustments. So when you go in and sit down with someone and say, okay, here's what we did. If we were really thinking about it in the new way, how would we have done it differently? And then they go, oh, I guess we could have done it that way. I guess that you're right. Now they start to see it.
Yeah, it's got a lot to do with, I think, I heard somewhere once that humans can't do what they haven't seen,
Yep.
right, or experienced. And often I've heard you talk about, well, let's put aside what we know and let's start talking about endless possibilities.
Yep.
Not dreams,
Yep.
but not fantasy, but endless possibilities. So we can really reach into our intuitive brain, right, and really start getting pretty creative. And I think often leaders miss that part of being part of leadership. They just think leadership is another form of management, maybe, empower people, but they're not empowering and leading, they're just empowering maybe. How do you teach a leader to start really reaching into that intuitive brain and start looking at endless possibilities if they've never really experienced it? Or they're an engineer, and I'm an engineer, by the way, so I'm not dissing engineers, but maybe we're more logically or rationally based. We want to have a formula. How do we go right brain?
So it's interesting. It's a little bit. It sounds like it's magic, and some people have it, some don't. But that's actually, in this circumstance, it's not. It's more mechanics. One of the things that we've observed over time is, without knowing it, most people are really anchored in the past. Here's what we've done. How do we improve on it? They're not as good at looking at, hey, what are new possibilities? And what we have to get is, that's a muscle. It's not a skill. It's not like I was born with this ability to do it. Now, are some a little more than others, of course, but it's okay to say, hey, what's a new possibility on? But if I'm never having those conversations, that muscle, that habit is weak. And what we do is help people develop that habit, which is, well, what are other possibilities? What's another possibility? And what people do is they live in this, well, it's all or nothing. It's either what we've done or bad, or like there's only two. There's a ton of choices. We're just not looking at them. Once you start looking at them, you get energized, because wait, there's another possibility on how we could do this.
I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that.
Exactly. And it's like you open up a window, okay? And what we talk about is, like, without knowing it, people really live in what we call that rear view mirror. And they're not looking at what's in front of them. Once you start opening it up, it just opens up more and more and more. But you got to develop it, and you have to actually challenge yourself. One of the things we talk about is, commit to being your best, commit to high performance, because this is not an innate thing. We have an innate survival instinct, okay? We don't have a high performance instinct. Okay, we will survive. You will find possibilities to survive. That is the human condition. That's why we're still on the planet. That's the way it works. we will not naturally gravitate to what's highest performance. I've been recently watching, like Nick Saban shares a video on this of like, what's normal is average. High performance is not normal. So we're asking for not normal. But everyone can be their best because it's not ability. When you commit to that high performance, it makes sense to challenge, look forward, and what are new possibilities all the time. What people tend to do is they look for them when they have to. And sometimes it's too late. Like you got to have a hard lesson and then really learn, like, wow, we didn't do that the right way. But if you were out front looking for new possibilities, because it becomes a practice and a muscle. And I've seen people go from horrible at it to really good at it in months because it just becomes a practice.
And the sum of all the people being their best creates performance,
that's
right?
That's capacity. Yeah. That's productivity. If I have a team of 100 and I can get everyone, to take 2 steps forward, that's 200 steps.
Yeah.
It's not 2 steps, right? So if everyone finds that next thing for them, that why they're fundamentally better, right? That's that new possibility, stepping up a little more. That aggregates. And that's what we look for in organizations, which is how do we unlock that productivity? And in your examples, like here's the way we're doing it today. If you were doing it this way, which is kind of more of the right way, the optimal way, what does that actually do to the measurable outcomes? You unlock that productivity and capacity and results, but it's there. Like it's not magic. The capacity and the productivity is there to be had.
I love that because that's exactly right. So as you're showing people how to do it the right way and they see the value to themselves and how they now can take 2 steps forward, they actually do that almost automatically. Like, well, if I can do this, then these become options. Oh yeah, you can do that in the system. Okay, if I can do that, then, and they start actually exploring what good looks like. But there's a tipping point for that to happen. And there's all the self-limiting beliefs we talked about.
Yeah, and on that, now all of a sudden, remember they were holding on to what they know. Now they're seeing the benefit of going to where it's better. Yeah. So now they let go of that. It's a game of misdirection. Instead of saying, hey, why do we keep doing what we're doing? It's say, doesn't it make more sense to go over here? When people move over here, they let go of that entrenchment. So there is a critical mass component to it, like a few, and then even on an individual level, like I'm a little committed there, but I'm still a little here, then I'm a little more there. And so but at a team level, it is like you build that critical mass. And then you really unlock capacity that's always there, but you were limited with, you were saying, wait, here's our capacity, but here's our capacity with these habits and this thinking. Same people, different habits, different thinking, whole different capacity. You don't have to change the team sometimes. Now there's always little changes. Do we have the right people? That's till the end of time. So like there's always dynamics and changing of teams.
What do you say to executives who've spent millions and millions of dollars implementing this tool, in our case, SAP, and they didn't get the results they're looking for? They're kind of stuck in that little bit of treading water. They're surviving, right? Yeah. How do you get them to go, it's okay to spend money again to make things better? Just because you implement doesn't mean you don't continue to invest in your people and your processes and in performance. How do you help them overcome that?
Really good question. And I think the part that we forget is the things we did over here that made us successful, we're probably not doing in certain areas. An example of that is they're probably in a very senior position. I guarantee they had disappointments along the way. And I guarantee when they had those disappointments, they didn't go, well, I guess I'm never going to make it, right? They dusted themselves off. They tried again. They pushed over here. They did this. And my point of this is taking one pass and having something not work and as well as you wished, and then saying, well, this is the way it's going to be forever. That is not what made them successful. And you want to get them to get is actually what made them successful is no. You try something, it doesn't work, you make an adjustment. What's missing, and you and I talk about this, is that anchoring. What does it really look like when it's working? And often that's what's missing. And then what happens is the way it's working where it's suboptimal becomes what they know, and then they're entrenched in it. And you have to break that cycle. And that's part of what we help people get is, what you know isn't the only possibility. Now, it takes work to get to the new way of working, but the value you get out of that work is now you're optimizing the tool. And optimizing, there's a trap in that. It's like we're doing the best we can with it. Everyone thinks that's like fairy tale land and everything's perfect. It's never perfect. It's just much, much better, right? It's like there's issues, there's things you got to work through. When I'm having that is just part of life versus it's ideal. There is that's where we stay out of there's always going to be areas of opportunity and improvement, but you're in a whole different place than it's a new normal.
Right. And I think one of the challenges I think a lot of executives and businesses face in the world we play in is supply chains are incredibly volatile.
Yeah.
Right? We've all experienced some version of that already, and it's just going to continue to get more volatile, right? And unpredictable.
Yep.
And so obviously there's a lot of technology out there to try and create more predictability around it. And what people fail to understand is that the predictability isn't in the tool, right?
That's right.
It's in you being able to apply the right rules or levers into the tool so that it can then adjust when the volatility happens. And the trap that people fall into is when you think of an SAP tool, they see it as a tool.
Yeah.
They see it as just this big rigid thing that I put in place. They don't see it as an asset. They don't see it as something that says, it needs care and feeding. I need to continuously invest in it, and really get people to kind of rise above the transaction so that they can actually manage the rules, to manage the process, to manage the business, to meet and keep up with the volatility of the real physical world out there. So that's a real challenge we find all the time. And I'm wondering to what extent some of the principles you're talking about when you relate to what good looks like,
yep.
setting that, how can that actually help organizations mature into that faster? Rather than saying, well, that's maybe 10 years from now, right?
Yeah, I think
when the latest AI tool comes out, we'll get it. So
right, yeah, and that'll solve it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the part that you said is important is it's a tool, it's an instrument, right? And if we're in the same room and there's three of us and someone hands all three of us a guitar, it's the same instrument, but it's how well you play the guitar. If someone hands us a set of tools and says, hey, go build the house, it's how well you use the tools, who gets the best house or who can actually build a house. So it's not like what people do often, a little too much, is that's going to solve it. And they don't look at what is our side of that. And when you take that into the equation, it's like, wait, when we're optimizing the tool, what does that look like? And then we realize, wait, I have an active participation in this. And when we get it right, the results are up here. If we're not as good at it, the results are down here. And the thing is, it's very measurable.
Yeah,
it's very measurable.
And there's a real knowledge gap too that
Yeah.
needs to be filled.
Yeah,
Right, giving you a tool, 3 different people a hammer, it really depends on how well they know how to use it.
That's right.
To be able to build the most optimal version of whatever
Yeah.
the house looks like, right? Talk to me a bit about that education gap.
Yeah.
This knowledge gap is kind of steeped in what you said earlier, where you bring to the table all your experiences and that's your knowledge. Then suddenly you implement something that is more sophisticated and maybe how the way you've done it.
Yeah.
But we try to make the sophistication fit what we know. How do we change the attitude to say, no, I really need to rather try and think about what do I need to do
That's right.
to fill my knowledge to be able to actually meet the new way?
Yeah, and so I like the way you said it. Here's our knowledge for what we've done. Now we have this new way of working, and what we're doing is the same knowledge versus what we need to do is say, wait, point B for us is where are we going? What does good look like? And it's like we have the right knowledge. We know the right things. We have the right knowledge within the organization and team. That's an active process. You don't wake up and you start there. And what we have to get as part of our role and our job is, wait, what do we need to know now? And strong organizations and strong performance organizations and people realize it's an active process. Meaning, what do I need to know today is different than what I needed to know 6 months from now, which is going to be different than what I'm going to need to know 6 months from now or 6 years from now. And it's an ongoing process. And if there's a gap, it's what are we doing to close that gap? And how are we getting, because if you know a little more, you get better results. If you know a little more, you get little, but what people do is they do all or nothing. Like, I don't know, I know it's too far. What we do is we talk about setting those base camps. Like, okay, if we know a little more, what is that? If we know a little more, what does that look like? And each one of those little gains, now instead of tying it to the pain, tying it to the productivity. Well, those gains equaled X in results.
It's more of a pull process than a push process.
That's right. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but are there things that you see, I'm curious, that are like consistent, with your customers? Like, what are their biggest challenges, your challenges with them? I'm curious.
Very much so. And I think one of the things that we experience is that when we start showing customers what they've done with their SAP system and what is the potential future, showing them kind of that whole roadmap, almost to the T, everybody can see the benefit. Everybody inherently can say, oh, that would make life easier. That would make my people work better. Yes, I can even see the performance improvements in my business. The biggest challenge I find is that executives have either a cost mindset or a value mindset. And the difference for us is if you don't, like we were talking earlier, if you don't see your SAP implementation or investment as an asset that you want to continuously improve and care for, then you have a cost mindset.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, I've spent it, I'm not going to spend another whatever. Even if you say spend $1 to save 100, people go like, nope, I still got to spend $1. And I find it fascinating that people that are executive levels are so stuck in that. Those that actually go, I will spend $1 all day long to get 100, and I'm going to get, my people are going to be, have a better work-life balance. They're going to work, the things are going to be easier for everybody, and we're going to get $100. Like, those people they drive, they lead from the front, change comes with it. And there's just so much more that comes with leaders that have that mindset. When you get stuck in cost mindset, it's almost like, prove to me, with no shadow of a doubt, right, that you are going to make that $100 happen. And that's where I think most clients get stuck.
Yeah. No, I think that people underestimate, like, everyone thinks that everyone's making the best decisions all the time in senior organizations and everything's figured out. But the truth is they're under pressure and they're feeling the squeeze as well, and wait, what if I spend this money if it doesn't work? Or they're just going to talk about budget, and then the value's over here, and they're not even in the same conversation. And there's an illogical nature to people and human behavior. And it's funny because I always joke and say I have an economics degree and it's useless because it's based on rational behavior. And people are supposed to, economics theory is all rational. Well, people aren't always rational. The one thing I'm not surprised by what you just shared. I often find that the one thing, and it's not always easy to do, which is how do you get people in the right column, because that's when they're more rational. If they're in the left column, they're more defensive, they're more guarded. Now, I'm not saying there's a magic switch to get people over there, but oftentimes that's that challenge of being in that left column. As part of it is we're a little more irrational, we're a little more defensive, we're a little more guarded. So, and there's a lot of that in organizations because there's so much pressure and people feel that, and it's very normal for organizations to kind of be in that space of being more defensive and guarded than, hey, rationally, $1 for 100 makes sense to everyone every day.
And I think we forget that, executives are humans, right?
People.
They're just people as well. And they have a set of past experiences that they bring to the table. Consultant fatigue.
Yep.
I've been burnt before. Oh, we've tried something like this. We said we're going to save it and we never did. Like, all of these things come to the table as well. And then those, in my opinion, the irrational decisions kick in because no matter how you have a conversation with them, if that's their paradigm, they can move from it.
Yeah.
So talk to me a bit about how do you move them into the right column then? If somebody's showing up in that way where they're just stuck, they're like, I don't believe it. My gut's telling me it looks like it, but you know what? It's still going to cost me too much to be able to gain the value. How do you get them into their right column thinking?
Well, it's definitely not easy, but I'll talk about a couple little things that can work sometimes. And one of the things we use a lot is, hey, what's your air, water, food? And air, water, food is what are your highest priorities? And you may be talking about their food, and they're really worried about their air, and you have to figure out how you can tie what you're doing to their air. And once you get to their air, that's what matters most to them because it's survival. And if you can connect what that conversation to what really matters to them, now you're actually in their pain, you're in their pain point and solving for it, where they feel is like, wait, this is the most important thing. So just understanding that air, water, food piece can help because, they may be saying, wait, I need X, and you need to frame it in their air, not in your food type of thing, or what is their food, right? So that's part of this is what are their priorities? What is most important to them? That's a big one.
Yeah, and I want to drill into that a little bit because, you can lay out the best business performance increase capabilities that's possible based on some kind of initiative or transformation or whatever. But if the guy's worried about his job, right, or he's already not met his goals last year, and this is now the second year in a row, and he's not even willing to tell you that that's the actual fear, you're stuck again, right? Because now they go back to cost basis, they go back to all these different paradigms because they steep back in their past, and it's a little bit like I've been slapped on the wrist, I'm not going to be slapped again, right?
Yeah.
How do you break through that? Or how do you solicit that out of somebody if they don't even want to share, what's their deepest fear?
Well,
and by the way, they could be having things going on at home that's weighing on them, right?
And some of this is they won't tell you. You just got to kind of poke around and see where the pain is, because that's like, okay, that's what really matters. And when I work with, it's a lot of my leadership, and their boss may not tell them, hey, here's air, water, food. And I say, wait, what's the thing that they're going to react the most to negatively if you stop delivering on it? That's their air, and it's like, because everyone say this is most important, but it's actually real behavior on what's the thing that gets the biggest reaction. And I use the analogy, if you take away my food, I'll be grumpy. You take away my air, you're going to have my full attention in 1 minute. So it's like you're going to get that attention. There's one other element that is more around personalities and things like that. And we talk about it as just getting that right. What's the right tone with how they work? Mm. And that's more nuanced, but it's like, if someone likes numbers, you better give them numbers. If someone wants personality, you give them personality.
Detailed people versus...
If you want, it's like, and we call that kind of your being, who do you need to be for this person? Because it's like, who do you need to be to make them feel? Because it's one of the things we talk about. It's not the result you need to drive the experience. A lot of people, their finish line is a result when the result isn't the finish line. The finish line is the experience. And what you're really trying to figure out is, what do I need to do to change how that person feels? Because people make decisions on how they feel. Right. So that's that. Wait, is it going in the wrong direction? Is it going in the right direction? Because if they change how they feel about it and they go, oh, this is important, oh, this is urgent, then they say, yes, this makes sense. If they're still, I don't know, hesitant, that's kind of, and what we do is we tend to focus on the result. And really, and a lot of people do this intuitively, but what you're really looking at is, wait, I got to get what makes this person feel comfortable or urgent, right? They need some urgency, like, wow, why aren't we doing this? So they go from, we can't do this, to, wait, we should have done this 6 months ago.
Yeah,
because we'd be seeing the benefits today of what you just said, right? That's the urgency piece.
I mean, the air, water, food makes so much sense, and also, but there's nothing worse than somebody not listening, and then they go, "We should have done it 6 months ago," because then it's always too little, too late, right?
Yeah. What do you think is been one of the key elements of the success with you and your teams, with your client, when you actually get into the implementation? Like what's kind of that secret sauce that has made you successful with your clients over the years? Like what's the thing that, hey, we do this really well? Because what always I like to get is what's good, and then you can go, and then if we add this, we're even better. But knowing what you're good at is something really important, because then you stay good at those things, and because a lot of times organizations don't embrace their strengths, is what I see.
Yeah, there's a lot of components and make the magic sauce the potion it is, right? But fundamentally steeped within the entire thing, the golden thread, if you want, is helping people achieve their goals by educating them, like breaking some of the old barriers, like raising their level of understanding, letting them see the value, see what it means to them, and then being able to multiply that. We wrap that with methodology and metrics and coaching and nudging and all the normal stuff to it. But at the end of the day, if you're able to really help somebody see the benefit to them and how it's going to benefit their team members and how it's going to benefit their organization, and you can push them in the right direction, when those aha moments happen, that makes us so excited. One of our favorite versions of measures of success outside of all of these business benefits of inventory and cost savings and EBITDA and everything else is when somebody gives you a hug when you leave, because at that point you really, really know that you've changed their life.
Yeah.
And it's those single lives that you start changing. And again, we're not coming in and, doing something, taking to a ball game or doing something fun that's going to change their life. We're talking about they're spending 8 to 10 to 12 hours every day doing the same thing over and over again because they just don't know there's a better way.
Yeah.
And showing them that better way, just like the smiles, the enlightenment, and then to your point, it starts identifying endless opportunities. Well, if I can do this, then these things become options, and this becomes an option.
Yeah.
And they will start creating that. We know then at that point in time, the business performance will come.
Yeah.
It's like, to your point, is the business performance isn't the goal, it's the outcome of actually all these little things along the way.
Yeah. No, that's great, because that's the sustainability too.
That's right.
And you said something, we didn't take them to a bowl game, which is a one-time event. You helped them where they work every day, which is a big part of their life. That's right. So that's us. We like that we're here to help people where they work, and it's not magic, but it's like, what are the little things that make them have that better experience? That's great. That's really great.